On to this story now. The Western Cape Education Department is angry that taxi organizations are preventing children from attending school. More than 1,800 pupils didn't get to classes yesterday. Education MEC David Maynier says buses in Mfuleni were stopped and prevented from transporting pupils, leaving children stranded in the rain. Maynier joins me now virtually and live just to give us more details. MEC, thank you very much for your time. I understand that these types of incidents actually started around last week. I saw a video on social media that broke a lot of parents' heart of pupils begging to go to school. What's the way forward? What's government planning to do to make sure that at least education is still given to these young children?
Well, last week I visited Academia Primary School, where nearly 90% of the learners were not present at a primary school. The principal and staff were doing a fantastic job preparing learner support packs and distributing those learner support packs either electronically or through networks of parents to ensure that learning and teaching continued while learners were at home. But this situation cannot continue. As we stand today, we have 993 learners who are not at school as a result of the taxi blockade imposed by the taxi associations in the Western Cape.
Are they giving you any reasons why they're targeting children?
So what lies behind this is the taxi associations who want to enter into what is called a partnership, or what they call a partnership, which is essentially trying to force me to cede learner transport contracts to the taxi associations. And I do have some information at my disposal to suggest that this goes even further. What the taxi associations want is to get their claws into not just learner transport contracts, but also transport contracts relating to the distribution of food for school nutrition and indeed the distribution of learner support materials. So what you have here is an outright attempt at extortion by the taxi associations in the Western Cape.
So, I'm still worried about what the way forward is because, you might remember that during COVID-19 and hard lockdown, there were many children who, for instance, would get support packs, but there are children who, I think I was even like that when I was still at school. I needed the teacher, the physical presence of a teacher to be able to ask all the relevant questions, etc. So what about those children who probably won't be assisted by these care packs?
Well, my absolute priority is to make sure that every learner returns to school and that teaching and learning commences at our school, because you're absolutely right. What the pandemic taught us is that schools matter and that contact time with teachers matter. So my absolute priority is to get our learners back to school and to make sure that teaching and learning resumes. I have taken a very hard line with the taxi associations. I've been absolutely clear that there will be no engagement with the taxi associations as long as they are holding learners hostage and terrorizing learners and parents in our province. And for that reason, I've laid criminal charges with the SAPs. Yes. The SAPs have a much higher visibility on our learner transport routes. And one taxi association, Cadeta, I've hauled before the Cape High Court, and we have agreed to an interim arrangement where they have agreed not to intimidate, threaten, or prevent our learner transport from operating and transporting children to schools in the Western Cape.
I know that this question might be a little unfair, but do you have any idea why they're doing this, particularly in the Western Cape?
First, I don't think that this is confined to the Western Cape. I do not have current information, but I think it would be fair to suggest that this kind of thing takes place in other provinces, but other provinces, unlike the Western Cape, have agreed to reach some kind of partnership with the taxi associations. And I am not prepared to do that, because to concede and start to allocate contracts to taxi associations outside a competitive bidding process is in fact just to descend into a mafia state. And I am holding the line here in the Western Cape.
All right. Well, are you hoping, after you said that you hold Cadetta to the Western Cape High Court, are you hoping that tomorrow there'll be 100% attendance of pupils at schools?
Well, what we're seeing, I think my approach is working. And the evidence for that is I have 4,182 more learners at school today than I did at the peak of this taxi blockade last week. So I think it is working, but ultimately I want the taxi associations to lift the blockade. I want all learners to return to school, and I want teaching and learning to resume before I have any engagement with the taxi associations. That is the bottom line.
And just lastly, how's your relationship, for instance, with the National, Minister of Basic Education? Have you tried to get any assistance from her, or do you think that your plans individually have actually resulted in a positive way?
I have an excellent working relationship with Minister Angie Motshega and the National Department. We have not been in contact with the National Department on this matter. We feel that we are handling this matter effectively, and I think that is demonstrated by the fact that we, as I've said, have 4,182 more learners present at school today. But the bottom line is the taxi associations have got a gun to my head, and I'm not going to blink.
Yeah. Okay, I hear you, MEC, and thank you very much for your time. Before I let you go, though, you have another issue with school placements. Can you give us an update on how that's looking so far in terms of placing pupils at schools?
Well, we have rolled out in our province a unprecedented rapid school build program, rolling out infrastructure at 4 times the pace than we have ever done, putting in place 842 additional classrooms, 26,000 additional places to absorb more learners. There is, of course, still pressure in the system. We've placed over 98% of our grade 1s and grade 8s, but we are now focusing on a relatively small group of extremely late applications. These would be learners that applied not just after the closing date, not just after schools closed, but indeed after January and sometimes even in mid-January. So we are focusing now on our extremely late applications and working around the clock to make sure that every learner who needs a place gets a place in a school here in the Western Cape.
All right, MEC, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. That is the Western Cape's Education MEC, David Maynier.